"Do look away from me," the Alpha King whispered to his scared Omega. "You're safe now." The sun had already dipped behind the jagged mountains, leaving the forest of Urindor shrouded in a heavy, silver mist. Every tree seemed to reach like skeletal fingers toward the sky, and the wind whispered secrets that no human ear was meant to hear. Lyra ran, her small feet barely making a sound on the moss-covered ground, though her heart pounded like a war drum. Behind her, shadows moved with unnatural grace, creeping closer with every step. Fear gripped her chest, sharp and cold. She had been running for so long, hiding from people who promised only pain. But this was different. The shadows that hunted her now were older than fear itself. Lyra stumbled over a root, falling into a shallow hollow. Her palms burned from the rough bark, and her breathing came in sharp, uneven bursts. She looked up, scanning the twisted shapes of the trees, trying to make sense of the forest. Something inside her whispered that she wasn't truly alone. She could feel it, eyes cold and heavy, watching her every move. Then came the sound. Low, deliberate footsteps, not like the creatures that had chased her for nights on end. These were measured, powerful, and controlled. She froze, her body trembling as a shadow detached itself from the darkness ahead. It was a man, tall, broad, moving with an elegance that made the mist swirl around him as though obeying his command. His eyes glowed faintly in the twilight, amber and molten, burning through the fog. Lyra wanted to scream, but no sound came. The man knelt slightly, his presence terrifying yet strangely comforting. "Don't look away from me," he whispered, his voice soft but edged with authority, a sound that seemed to shake the very air around them. "You're safe now." Lyra's chest tightened. She had never known safety. Not since the night her family had been taken from her, the night she had learned that the world could be cruel beyond imagining. And yet, something in his eyes told her that he meant it. The fear that had always ruled her life was suddenly tangled with curiosity, with a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, not all monsters were meant to harm. Before she could respond, a howl tore through the trees. The shadows surged forward again, closer, hungrier. Lyra's instincts screamed for her to run, but her body refused to move. The man, this strange, powerful being, stood and stretched out a hand. The shadows recoiled as if the very air around him burned. "Go," he commanded softly. The word was gentle but carried the weight of a king. "You can trust me." Lyra's mind screamed, arguing, fearing, yet she did something she hadn't done in years. She obeyed. She allowed him to take her hand, and a warmth spread from his touch, settling in her chest, grounding her. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the dark corners of the forest as if even they feared him. Once they were clear, he guided her through winding paths she didn't recognize. The forest seemed to part for him, the mist swirling like silver waves around their feet. He spoke little, but his presence was a shield, a quiet promise that no harm would reach her. Lyra's heart was still pounding, but it was no longer purely from fear. It was something else, something unfamiliar, something like the beginning of trust. Finally, they emerged onto a cliff that overlooked the kingdom. The moon had risen, casting a pale, cold light on the valley below. The castle of Kale, the Alpha King, rose like a shadowed crown, towers of black stone glittering with frost and enchantment. It was a place of legend, feared and revered, where whispers of his power traveled far beyond the forest. Lyra's breath caught. She had only ever heard stories. She had never imagined the man who had saved her would be the ruler of such a place. The Alpha King turned to her, and for the first time he spoke her name. "Lyra." His voice was softer now, almost intimate, carrying a note of concern. "You are not like the others. You are not prey. You are important." Lyra looked at him, confusion and fear battling with a strange warmth she couldn't name. "Important? How could I be important?" Her voice was small, barely audible over the wind. "You have a gift," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "A light hidden deep inside you. A light that even I cannot control, and that light can save more than just yourself. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever spoken of her in this way. No one had ever looked at her with anything other than contempt or fear. But the Alpha King saw her. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she could be more than the frightened girl who ran from the world. The air shifted suddenly, heavy and dark. Lyra shivered. The shadows weren't gone, they were only waiting. And from the forest below, a faint, menacing howl echoed, a reminder that the dangers she had run from were still very real. Cale noticed her hesitation and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. His touch was firm, a silent declaration that he would not let her fall. "I will not let them take you," he said quietly, but the words carried the authority of someone who had faced death countless times and emerged unbroken. "Not now, not ever." Lyra swallowed hard, trying to match the courage in his voice. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe in the promise of safety. Yet a part of her, the part that had learned to survive by fleeing, warned her to run again, to disappear into the mist where no one could find her. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw no malice, no cruelty, only power and something else. Something deeper, a quiet sorrow beneath the strength, a weight that only someone who had lost much could carry. And that touched her in ways she didn't yet understand. The night stretched around them, vast and silent, except for the distant cries of creatures lurking in the darkness. Lyra realized she was trembling, not from fear, but from the intensity of being seen, being protected, being chosen. Cale, sensing her inner conflict, spoke again. "You may think the world has only given you pain, Lyra. You may believe you are alone. But there are forces at work you cannot see, and not all of them wish you harm. Some are waiting for the moment to guide you, to prepare you for what is coming." What is coming?" she whispered, barely audible. Cale's gaze turned toward the horizon where dark clouds gathered like ink spilled across the sky. "A storm," he said simply. "A storm that will test both of us. That will decide whether we stand or fall. And you are a part of it, whether you like it or not." Lyra's mind raced. She wanted answers, yet she feared the truth. Something told her that this man, this Alpha King, was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was danger wrapped in strength, mystery woven with care. And somehow, he was the only one who could stand between her and the darkness that hunted her. As the first snowflakes of the evening drifted through the air, Lyra realized she could no longer run. Not tonight. Not while he was near. The forest no longer seemed threatening but alive with possibilities, as though the trees themselves whispered encouragement, guiding her toward a future she had never dared to imagine. Cale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet protective. "Do not look away from me," he whispered once more. "Not now, not ever." Lyra nodded, though her voice caught in her throat. I won't." For a moment they stood together in the moonlight, two figures bound by fate and fear, by light and shadow. Neither spoke, yet the silence was filled with unspoken promises, of protection, of discovery, of a bond forming that neither fully understood. But the night was not done. Far below the cliff, in the darkness of the valley, faint shapes stirred, shapes that were not human, shapes that hungered and schemed. The shadows Lyra had escaped were only the beginning. Something older, more cunning, was moving. And it would not rest until it had claimed the girl with the hidden light. Cale sensed it before she did. His eyes narrowed, amber flames against the pale moon. "They are coming," he said, voice low and dangerous. "And you will need to trust me completely." Lyra looked up at him, fear and something deeper coiling in her chest. She wanted to run, yet another part of her wanted to stay. She wanted to believe in the safety of his words, in the strength of his promise. She wanted in that moment to stop being the hunted girl of the forest and become someone more, someone who could stand beside the Alpha King, even in the face of darkness. The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying with it the scent of frost, stone, and shadows. Lyra shivered, not from the cold, but from the awareness that her life had changed forever. That night, in the forest of Urindor, beneath the watching moon, she had glimpsed the first threads of destiny weaving around her. And Kale, the terrifying yet magnetic Alpha King, was at the center of it. She did not yet know what the future held. She did not yet understand the dangers, the betrayals, or the power that slept within her. But as the first howl of approaching shadows cut through the night, she clung to his words, letting them anchor her trembling heart. "Don't look away from me. You're safe now." And for the first time in her life, she believed them. The morning after the night in the forest was cold and silent. Snow had settled on the twisted branches, and a pale sun barely broke through the mist. Lyra awoke on a soft bed in a small, simple chamber within Kale's castle. The walls were cold stone, yet a warmth lingered in the air as though the room itself had been touched by his presence. She sat up slowly, her hands trembling, remembering the night before, the shadows, the forest, and the moment the Alpha King had saved her. She did not understand why he had spared her, or why his eyes, amber and powerful, had looked at her as though she were the only thing that mattered in the world. Every instinct she had told her to be afraid, to flee, but something else, a strange warmth in her chest, told her to stay. The door opened quietly and Kale stepped inside. His presence filled the small room and Lyra felt both comforted and intimidated. He was dressed simply, yet every movement radiated authority. He closed the door behind him and crossed the room slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You are awake," he said softly, almost like a question, though it sounded more like a statement of fact. "Good. You need rest, Lyra, but you must also understand that the danger has not passed." Lyra shivered, remembering the shadows in the forest. They were after me," she whispered. "Why, I am nothing, just a girl." Her voice broke and she looked away, ashamed of her trembling. Kale knelt beside her bed, his hand reaching out but not touching, a silent question waiting in the air. "You are nothing to them, yes," he said gently, "but you are everything to yourself and to the light you carry. That is why they want you. That is why I cannot let you go." Lyra looked at him, searching for understanding in his stern yet compassionate gaze. She wanted to ask why he cared, why someone so powerful would risk so much for her. But before the words could leave her mouth, a loud knock echoed through the chamber. Kale stood, his expression hardening instantly. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice low but full of command. Lyra nodded, unsure, as he moved to the door. The hall outside was empty, save for a single figure cloaked in black, standing silently in the shadow. The figure bowed low, then spoke. "My king, the Northern Forest Scouts report movement. Strange creatures, shadows unlike any we have seen, are gathering near the village of Ravenshallow." Kale's eyes narrowed, amber fire burning bright. "I know," he said simply. "We will handle it, keep the castle secure, and ensure the wards remain strong." The figure bowed again and vanished. Kale turned back toward Lyra. "Come," he said. "You need to see something." Lyra followed, her feet hesitant on the stone floors. Kale led her through winding corridors, past armored statues that seemed alive in the flickering torchlight, and into a great hall. The space was vast, high vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadows above, and in the center, a large map of the kingdom lay on a carved table. Kale placed a hand on the map and glowing threads of magic spread across it, showing the forests, villages, and darkened areas. "These shadows are not ordinary," he explained. "They are drawn to your light, Lyra. They are ancient, cunning, and patient. And they will not stop until they have claimed it." Lyra swallowed hard. "My light?" she asked. She did not understand. She was small, untrained, and terrified. How could she carry something so important? Kale's gaze softened. "Yes," he said. "You have a power within you, Lyra, one that can illuminate the darkness, but you cannot control it alone. That is why you are here, why I brought you to me." Lyra shivered again, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. She had always thought of herself as weak, a girl meant to hide and survive. And now, this man, terrifying yet protective, was telling her that she carried something far greater than she had ever imagined. For hours, Kale guided her through the castle, showing her secret passages, training rooms, and magical wards that shimmered faintly in the light. Lyra tried to absorb it all, but her mind kept drifting back to the forest, to the shadows, and to the feeling that she had narrowly escaped death. Finally, they arrived at a small courtyard, open to the sky. Snow crunched under their feet as Kale stopped in the center. "You will need to practice," he said. "Your gift will not awaken on its own. You must be ready for the dangers that are coming." Lyra nodded, though fear and doubt gripped her. She had never been trained in anything beyond hiding, running, and surviving. She did not know if she could do what he asked. Kale reached out, placing his hand over hers. "Do not fear," he said softly. "You are not alone, and I will not let harm come to you, Lyra, not while I breathe." The words were like fire in her chest. She looked up at him, and for a moment, fear and uncertainty fell away, replaced by something new: trust. And something deeper, something she did not dare name. Their training began slowly. Kale taught her to focus, to feel the light within her, to understand it as something alive, something that could protect as well as heal. At first, Lyra struggled, her energy scattered and weak. But Kale's presence was steady, unyielding, guiding her without pressure, teaching her patience as much as skill. Days passed in this rhythm: training, meals, quiet moments by the fire, and the occasional patrol through the castle grounds. Lyra began to notice things about Kale that others might not see. The quiet loneliness behind his eyes, the way he flinched at loud noises though he was a king, the careful gentleness with which he treated those under his protection. He was a man of immense power, yet not one without flaws, and somehow that made him more human, more real. One evening, as the sun set in a haze of pink and gold, Lyra and Kale were walking along the castle walls. Snowflakes drifted softly, catching in Lyra's hair. She shivered, and Kale immediately removed his cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You must take care of yourself," he said quietly, his voice carrying both command and concern. "Strength comes not just from skill, but from balance." Lyra's cheeks warmed and she looked up at him. Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You could have left me to the shadows. Why not?" Kale's gaze softened, and for the first time he allowed himself a small sigh. "Because I have seen what fear can do to a person," he said. "And I have seen what hope can do. You remind me of the hope I lost long ago. I cannot ignore that." Lyra felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear, longing, and something she had never known, the feeling of being truly seen. She wanted to speak, to ask more, but the sudden sound of movement below made them both tense. From the forest beyond the castle walls, a dark shape moved, a shadow unlike any they had seen. It was faster, more cunning, and it seemed to study them, waiting for the right moment. Lyra's pulse quickened. The nightmares of the forest returned, but this time she did not flee. Kale stepped in front of her, his stance protective and commanding. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "Do not look away." The shadow advanced, and Lyra felt the pulse of her light awaken inside her. It was faint at first, a gentle glow in her chest, but it grew stronger with each heartbeat. The shadow hissed, recoiling slightly from the warmth of her presence. Kale's eyes widened and a rare smile flickered across his face. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly. "Do not doubt yourself." Lyra drew a deep breath and let the light flow outward, a shimmering aura that pushed the shadow back. It screeched, retreating into the forest, leaving only silence behind. Kale turned to her, his amber eyes full of admiration. "That is only the beginning," he said. "There will be more, much more, and you must be ready." Lyra nodded, her fear replaced by determination. She was no longer just a girl running from shadows. She was learning to stand, to fight, and to shine even in the darkness. As they returned to the warmth of the castle, Lyra could not shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting. The danger had not passed, it had only grown stronger. And far beyond the walls, in the black forests of Urindor, A pair of glowing eyes studied the girl who carried the light, waiting for the moment to strike. The castle of Kale, dark and towering, seemed almost alive as snow fell silently over its spires. Inside, the warmth of the halls was comforting, but outside, the wind whispered of dangers that moved through the forests and valleys beyond. Lyra walked beside Kale through the corridors, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, though it could not hide the tension in her steps. Something had changed since the last attack. The shadows had returned, more focused, and now the unexpected arrival of a figure from her past added a new layer of unease. The messenger at the castle gates had delivered the news with trembling hands. The man or woman, who had once been her closest friend, someone she had thought lost to the cruel fate that had destroyed her family, was alive. But survival did not mean safety. The messenger carried urgent words. The one who had hunted her for years, the one who had killed her family, was moving closer to Kale's kingdom. And worst of all, they knew about her. Lyra's hands clenched in front of her, white knuckles revealing the tension she fought to hide. I cannot face them," she admitted, her voice low. "Not yet, not without knowing I am strong enough." Kale's amber eyes, sharp and unwavering, softened for a moment. He reached for her hand, holding it lightly, yet firmly. "You are stronger than you know," he said, repeating the words he had spoken before. "But even strength needs guidance. You are not alone, Lyra. Not now, not ever." Lyra looked up at him, searching for reassurance. She had come to trust him, to rely on him in ways she had never allowed herself before. Yet fear lingered, and doubt whispered that no power could protect her from what was coming. Kale, sensing her hesitation, let go of her hand and motioned for her to follow him. They entered a hidden training hall deep within the castle, a place few had ever seen. Torches burned on the walls, casting dancing shadows across the stone floor. The room was large, with open space for movement, and in the center, a faint magical glow shimmered like a soft dawn. "You will practice here," Kale said. "Your gift is awakening, but it is not yet ready. You must learn control, focus, and courage." Lyra nodded, her stomach tight with both fear and anticipation. She stepped into the glowing circle in the center of the hall, feeling the energy hum beneath her feet. Kale stood behind her, silent but present, his gaze never leaving hers. The first exercises were simple. Kale guided her to channel the light within her, to focus on a single point, and to push it outward in small bursts. At first, the glow was weak, flickering like a candle in the wind. Shadows around the edges of the room seemed to stir, as if testing her, waiting to see if she would falter. "You are doing well," Kale said softly, though his eyes remained sharp. "Do not let fear control you. Let it sharpen you instead." Lyra concentrated, and slowly, the light grew brighter, pushing the shadows back. Each success filled her with a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. Her body ached, her mind strained, but Kale remained patient, guiding her through every movement, correcting, encouraging, and teaching her to trust not just the power, but herself. Hours passed, and Lyra began to feel a connection, not only to her gift but to Kale. His presence was steady, unwavering, and in moments of doubt it anchored her. She began to understand what he had meant when he spoke of trust, of hope, of the light within her. It was more than magic. It was courage, resilience, and the willingness to face the darkness, no matter how terrifying it seemed. During a brief pause, Lyra looked up at Kale. Why do you care so much about me?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Kale's expression softened, and he crouched to meet her gaze. "Because I have lost much," he said. "I have seen what darkness can do, how it consumes those who have nothing to protect them. I cannot let that happen to you. You are not just a girl I found in the forest. You are someone who matters, someone I will protect no matter the cost." Lyra's heart fluttered. She had never heard words like that before, not from anyone, not even from the people she had loved and lost. And yet hearing them from him, the alpha king of a kingdom shrouded in power and fear, made her feel seen. whole. Their training continued over the following days. Lyra's control over her light grew, but so did the tension between them. Every glance Kale gave her, every protective gesture, carried more weight than she could name. And every time she felt herself drawn to him, she reminded herself of the dangers, the shadows, her past, and the truth that nothing in her life had ever been simple. Then came the night of the first real test. A howl echoed through the castle grounds, followed by the sound of breaking gates. Shadows poured from the forest, faster and more numerous than before. Lyra's pulse raced, but this time she did not flee. She remembered Kale's words, the lessons of the past days, and the warmth of his presence that had steadied her. Kale drew his sword, its black steel glinting in the moonlight, and moved to meet the threat head-on. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. Lyra nodded, feeling the light within her respond to the danger. She focused, letting it expand, a shimmering glow that pushed back the darkness. The shadows hissed and recoiled, as if in pain from the brilliance of her courage. She stepped forward, letting the light flow from her hands, guiding it to protect the castle walls and the soldiers who rushed to meet the attackers. Kale fought with precision and power, each strike a dance of skill and strength. He moved with grace, but there was an urgency in his eyes, a worry for her safety. He could not afford to falter, for Lyra's light alone was not enough. Together they were strong, but separated they were vulnerable. Lyra watched him, and in that moment she realized something. Her fear, though still present, was not as powerful as her determination. And her determination was fueled not just by survival, but by trust in him, in herself, and in the bond that had begun to form between them. The battle raged through the night, shadows clawing at the walls, yet Lyra's light never wavered. Together, they drove the creatures back, forcing them into the dark forest beyond. When the last of the shadows had disappeared, silence fell over the castle. The snow glistened, reflecting the light of Lyra's gift, and for the first time the castle seemed less like a fortress of fear and more like a home, a place where light and shadow could coexist. Kale turned to her, breathing heavily, his amber eyes softened by both relief and admiration. "You did well," he said quietly. "Far better than I expected." Lyra's chest heaved with exhaustion and relief. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice small. Kale took a step closer, his gaze intense but gentle. "No," he said firmly. "You did this yourself. I guided you, yes, but the courage came from you. Remember that." For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, tension, and a connection that neither fully understood. Lyra felt her heart beat faster, not from fear but from something else, a spark, fragile yet undeniable, that had begun to grow in the space between them. But the peace was fragile. From the shadows beyond the courtyard, a figure emerged, one Lyra had never expected to see again. Her heart froze and she stepped back, trembling. The figure was cloaked in darkness, but there was a familiarity in their movement, a recognition that made her blood run cold. "Lyra," the figure said, their voice both familiar and haunting. "You cannot hide anymore. They are coming and you must choose." Lyra's eyes widened. Choose what?" she whispered, fear and confusion twisting inside her. Kale moved to stand between her and the newcomer, his sword ready. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice sharp as steel. "Do not come any closer." The figure raised their hands, a gesture of peace, though tension radiated from them like a storm. "I mean no harm," they said, "but the past you fled, it is here, and it will not wait. You must face it, Lyra, now." Lyra's chest ached. She had spent years running from shadows, from fear, from pain. And now, standing at the heart of a castle she barely understood, she realized that running was no longer an option. Her past had returned, and the choice before her would test not only her courage but the trust she had placed in Kale, the man who had become both her protector and the first light she had ever dared to follow. Kale's gaze met hers, unwavering and fierce. "Whatever comes," he said softly, yet with unshakable authority, "we face it together. You will not face it alone." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of her light and the steadiness of Kale's presence. The shadows of her past and the threats of the present collided, and she knew the path ahead would be treacherous, filled with danger, heartache, and trials that would test the strength of her gift, and the bond forming between her and the Alpha King. The snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the kingdom of Erendor in white silence. The wind carried an edge of warning, whispering through the castle's high towers and echoing across the frozen courtyards. Lyra stood in the great hall, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her hands trembling not with cold but with anticipation. Across from her, Kale stood like a shadowed mountain, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. The presence of the figure from her past, her childhood friend, now a messenger of warnings, had unsettled her, but she felt a new resolve forming in her chest. "You must understand," the messenger said, voice trembling but firm. "The one who destroyed your family, the one who hunts you still, has grown stronger. They know of your gift and they will not stop until it is theirs." Lyra's heart clenched. Years of running, hiding, and fear had led to this moment. Her light, the gift Kale had been teaching her to control, pulsed faintly within her, as though responding to the danger approaching. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was no longer a frightened girl alone in the forest. She had strength now, and she had Kale. Kale's hand found hers, strong and grounding. "You are ready, Lyra," he said softly, though the steel in his voice told her he would not allow failure. "Together we will face this. Whatever comes, you will not face it alone." Lyra nodded, feeling a surge of courage. The castle gates creaked as sentries reported shadows gathering in the forest. Figures moved with unnatural speed, dark forms blending with the night, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lyra felt her light respond instinctively, warming her hands and filling the hall with a soft glow. "They are close," Kale said, eyes narrowing. "Prepare yourself." Together they moved to the castle walls, the battlements stretching high above the valley. Below, the first wave of shadowed creatures advanced, their forms flickering like smoke, their movements silent and predatory. Lyra's pulse raced, but she did not step back. She focused on the glow within her, letting it expand outward, forming a barrier that shimmered against the approaching darkness. Kale drew his sword, black steel catching the moonlight, and took his position beside her. His presence was a shield as well as a weapon, and Lyra felt the bond between them solidifying, a bond of trust, courage, and shared purpose. The first clash came with a roar of shadows, their forms twisting and surging toward the castle. Lyra concentrated, sending bursts of her light outward. The creatures hissed and recoiled, but they did not retreat. Kale moved like a force of nature, every strike precise, every movement calculated. Together, they were a balance of light and shadow, power and control. Hours passed in the relentless fight. Lyra's arms ached, and her chest burned with exertion, but she refused to falter. She drew strength from Kale's presence, from the knowledge that she was not alone. And she felt something deeper growing within her, a recognition that her power, her courage, and her heart were tied to him in ways she could not yet name. Finally, the last of the shadowed creatures retreated into the forest, leaving the castle battered but standing. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted, her hands glowing faintly as her energy ebbed. Kale knelt beside her, gently lifting her chin so she met his gaze. "You did well," he said, his voice soft, almost intimate. "Far beyond what I expected." Lyra's chest heaved, not just from the fight but from the weight of the emotions swirling inside her. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Kale shook his head, a rare smile flickering across his face. "No," he said firmly, "you did this yourself. I guided you, but the courage, the light, it came from you. Never forget that." Before they could rest, the figure from Lyra's past stepped forward, drawing both of their attention. "There is more," the messenger said. The one who hunts you, they are inside the kingdom now. They know you are here, and they have allies who will not hesitate to strike. Lyra's heart pounded. Her past had finally caught up to her, and this was no ordinary threat. It was personal, a challenge that would test every lesson Kale had taught her, every ounce of courage she had discovered within herself. Kale's eyes burned with determination. "Then we end this tonight," he said, voice low but unwavering. "We face them together, Lyra. And we will not fail." They moved through the castle, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Lyra's light shimmered around her, reacting to the tension in the air, and Kale's sword hummed faintly with the power of his own abilities. Every corridor, every doorway seemed alive with anticipation. Finally, they reached the courtyard where the snow had turned red in the torchlight. From the shadows, the hunter emerged, a figure cloaked in darkness, their face hidden, but the aura of malice undeniable. Behind them, dark creatures stirred, shadows ready to strike. Lyra's light flared, bathing the courtyard in a warm glow. Kale stood beside her, sword ready, his presence steady and commanding. "This ends now," he said, voice ringing with authority. The shadowed hunter moved forward, and the battle began. Lyra's light clashed with the hunter's darkness, sparks of energy flying as the two forces collided. Kale fought with precision and power, moving between them and the attacking creatures, defending Lyra and striking with deadly skill. For a time, the battle seemed endless. Lyra struggled to control her light, to keep it strong against the overwhelming darkness. But she felt Kale's presence beside her, guiding her, steadying her, and she realized that together they were stronger than any shadow, any enemy. At the height of the fight, the hunter managed to strike a powerful blow, separating Lyra from Kale. Fear surged in her chest, but she remembered his words, the trust they had built, and the strength within her. She focused, her light growing brighter, more controlled, more powerful than ever before. With a final surge, Lyra unleashed the full force of her light. It spread outward in a wave, pushing the shadows back, scattering the creatures and breaking through the hunter's defenses. The courtyard glowed with brilliance, and when the light faded, the hunter lay defeated, their darkness dissipated. Kale rushed to Lyra's side, helping her to stand. She was exhausted, trembling, yet radiant in the glow of her power. Their eyes met, and for a long moment the world seemed to pause, the snow falling silently around them. "You did it," Kale said softly, his voice full of awe and pride. "You faced the darkness and did not falter." Lyra leaned against him, her exhaustion mingling with relief. "We did it," she corrected gently. "Together." Kale nodded, his hand brushing her hair back from her face. "Together," he agreed, amber eyes holding hers with a quiet intensity that spoke of more than words ever could. The castle and the kingdom were safe, at least for now. The shadows had been driven back, and the threat that had haunted Lyra's past was defeated. But the experience had changed her. She was no longer the frightened girl running through the forest. She was a warrior of light, strong and capable, and bound to Kale in ways that transcended fear or duty. As they stood together in the courtyard, snowflakes drifting around them, Kale spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Do not look away from me, Lyra. Not now, not ever." Lyra's heart stirred. She reached for his hand, holding it tightly, and for the first time she allowed herself to fully trust, fully hope, and fully feel the connection that had grown between them. "I won't," she said, voice steady, eyes shining. "Never." The snow continued to fall, the castle standing strong against the night, and in that moment, Lyra and Kale knew that whatever dangers might come, they would face them together. Shadows might rise again, challenges might appear, but the light they carried, within themselves and within each other, would always guide them. For Lyra, the journey from fear to courage was complete, and for Kale, the walls around his heart had begun to crumble, revealing the man who could protect, love, and trust. Together, they were more than a king and his Omega. They were a force that darkness could never conquer. And in the quiet of the night, as the snow swirled around the castle towers, They held each other close, knowing that the battles behind them had forged something stronger than any curse, deeper than any fear, and brighter than any shadow.